In his battle with Donald Trump for South Carolina's evangelical vote, Cruz receiving an endorsement yesterday from South Carolina Congressman Mark Sanford, part of a final push to gain support in the state and from the evangelical base.
It is easy to say, make America great again. That's easy to say. You can even put it on a baseball cap. But the question is, do you understand what it was that made America great in the first place? And what made this country great is, number one, we began with the understanding, it was a revolutionary understanding, that our rights don't come from government. Instead, the Declaration put it, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator.
Ted Cruz in the final push there. Joining us now is South Carolina Congressman Mark Sanford. Congressman, obviously the evangelical vote, very significant in South Carolina. We saw Ted Cruz do well in Iowa with the evangelicals and with organization. So how do those two things look for him now?
I think he has a strong organization. I think the question will be how the evangelical vote goes. Trump has, basically had a commanding lead on that front. But I would argue it's not evangelical vote per se, but that really it's the I-85 corridor, which is where textiles used to be in the state. And South Carolina lost 80,000 textile jobs not so many years ago. Some of those folks went on to get high-tech jobs in places like BMW or other, but some folks have been left behind, and I would argue that that's the jet fuel behind the Trump candidacy rather than, quote, evangelicals, even though they live in the same spots.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of that already in this race, in the short time that we've been watching it. In Iowa, in New Hampshire, that even with evangelicals, the most important thing appears to be the economy and who they think can turn that around. Now, you are backing Ted Cruz. How hard a decision was that for you? You made it very late in the game.
Yeah. The fact that I made it on a Friday afternoon before a Saturday says everything about me not particularly wanting to peg a dog in the fight. And as much as anything, it was a statement about my concern about the Trump candidacy. I absolutely get where people are coming from in terms of frustration with Washington and frustration with some pocketbook issues that are, I mean, really impacting themselves and those that they love. But the way in which he has gone about it, I think, has gone to the point of dangerous. When you go out there and say a former president was, in essence, a co-conspirator in 9/11, you get in a contest, if you will, with the Pope, you talk about deficit, but then you won't talk about entitlement spending. I could go down a litany of different things. I think he has turned this into something of a carnival. So I applaud the way that folks are pushing for something outside of politics. I get it. I once carried 2 pigs into the State House believing in challenging the status quo, but I'm really concerned about the tone and the tenor.
You know what? At the end of this evening, we're either going to be having the conversation that you were right and that those manners sort of issues and the way Trump presents himself matter to South Carolinians, but we may be having the conversation that, you know what, it didn't. That it didn't matter what he said about the Pope and that it didn't matter what he said about George Bush and that South Carolinians want something that is clearly different. Obviously, at this point, we don't know. Talk to me a little bit before I let you go about the demographic of the state, because what we've been hearing about South Carolina is that this electorate there is very different than it was even 4 years ago.
I would concur. What you got to remember about South Carolina is not only do you have the traditional evangelical base, not only do you have a significant military presence based on active duty and retirement alike, but you really have a really significant portion of the population that's new from somewhere else. I'm right now in Charleston, and it's burgeoning. And it's burgeoning because a lot of people have come from the upper Midwest or the Northeast to make South Carolina their home. And the same is true at the opposite end of the state. Up along the mountains, you got a lot of retirement communities. So those retirees, I think, are beginning this process of substantially changing the demographic base of the state.
You look at Greenville and Spartanburg and those areas that have a lot of new American companies in them. How does that change that area?
In the same way. I mean, people from somewhere else. I mean, South Carolina, when you think of Deep South, you think of, horse-drawn carriages and folks that have lived here through several generations. That's not the South Carolina of today. The South Carolina of today, I literally was at lunch just a little while ago, and I was speaking to a couple next to us at the table from Bulgaria. I'm like, what are you doing here? Well, we came here because we wanted to get in the business of transport. And so it's a much more international, and I would add this, South Carolina Botswana has the highest number on a per capita basis of direct foreign investment of any state in the domestic United States. I mean, Hawaii tops us out because of Japanese investment, but in the continental U.S., number one.
All right. Congressman Sanford, thank you very much.
What's up with Sophia these days, huh? From Bulgaria.